This past spring, I paid off my student loans, and as a reward to myself, I got a pedal drive kayak. I fished some of the local tournaments just after thaw. This is my first trip fun fishing on a local river. My initial thoughts on the boat at this time were that it's a very stable platform. I'm about 6 feet tall, 250, and I'm able to stand in the boat with no issues. The back rails for mounting hardware are a little bit far back from the chair, so they can be difficult to reach. The pedal drive system that Feelfree makes is called the Overdrive. It's their own design. It also has an electric motor attachment that I do not have. One thing I suggest if when you're putting it together, make sure that you put the pedals on the right sides. I managed to put them on the wrong sides and realized it at the boat ramp. So when I was trying to fix it, I managed to yank on it too hard and it flew out of my hand into the lake, and then I spent the next 2 hours trying to dig it out of the lake. Another important thing to note is that the propeller doesn't just come through the hole. It has to be aligned properly. You can do this by pressing down on the button in the center of the drive unit while rotating the pedals. The prop will stop once it's in the correct place, and you can just slowly pull the drive unit up. So I don't know if you can tell, but we're in about probably less than 6 inches of water right here. Handles pretty good. I like the canoe paddle for this just because it, like I said, it paddles a little bit more like a canoe. Especially when you're in real thick stuff like this or real shallow, it's just easier. The boat tracks fairly well, even with the canoe paddle. The kayak paddles I have are just too short to be used for a proper stroke when you have it set up for the pedal drive. I actually bought a stand-up paddle that I was using in conjunction the latter half of the year that works fairly well, and I'm actually thinking about just replacing the canoe paddle with it entirely. That way I don't have to carry one more thing around. On this particular day, there was a lot of activity on the water. I think most of it was carp, just kind of mouthing around, especially because it was in this thick stuff. But I was able to find some bass just strictly by watching them chase bait on the surface or just rummaging around in the weeds. About midway through the day, I was working my way downriver fishing the bank, and I saw what looked like some debris from a dock that may have gotten washed out the previous spring. I went over to it to make some casts, and I looked in the center and saw some activity. There was a barrel in the middle with a wood frame around it, and there was a hole in the middle, and two turtles were in it trying to get out. I think what had happened is that the river had been up the last probably 2 or 3 days, and they ended up just getting stuck in there when the water was going down. I was able to coax one out with my paddle, however the other one didn't want to come out while I was sitting there, so I ended up leaving him in the barrel, where he probably still lives to this day. In front of the pedal drive unit there's a hatch with a cutting board built into it, and the storage underneath I've been using for my soft plastics, but I've actually seen people build little mini coolers out of it. A lot of the stores up north are starting to carry the garlic dip and glow where they previously haven't, and it's really one of my go-tos, especially for off-color water. That little bit of extra scent really seems to bring them to the bait. I was having some success in that mid-depth range, but I still wasn't getting the bites I wanted, so I decided to go real shallow where I was still seeing a lot of activity and fish with a frog. One thing that I neglected to do to this boat that I would recommend that anybody who is fishing out of a kayak do is put an anchor trolley on it. It's definitely helpful, especially when you're in the river and current, for positioning the boat, or if you're in real shallow stuff and you can't use the pedal drive, it's great to hold yourself in place so you can cast.
God. Oh, son of a...
By the end of the day I was able to put a frog pattern together and get a couple decent fish. Overall impressions of the boat at this point of owning it are I'm pretty impressed. There's a few mods I can do to improve it, but overall it's a good fishing platform, especially for lakes. If there's any interest, I'll do a full review of the boat as well as my thoughts after a year of ownership. Thanks for watching, and tight lines.